I'll say this though, and you know, I briefly touched on this about how CrossFit has changed. It has worked on changing that paradigm. You know,
Yes.
you get on social media, and there's a lot more women that are being like, "Hey, I squatted 400," and they're excited that their legs and their ass are big, and that
Yes.
they've got definition in their shoulders, and they have big bench presses. I mainly see it, and this is a generational thing. You know, the big and bulky thing. It is with women that were, you know, in their, and I say this word loosely, their prime. You know, their 20s, like in the 90s, around that time period, because that was just drilled in their head so much. But now, women in their 20s, because they've been raised around this CrossFit, this being stronger is better, muscles on women are sexy.
Right.
They're not as hard to push into like
Right.
getting stronger, squatting heavy,
No,
benching, and all that.
CrossFit has got some problems,
Yeah.
but it has made it much, much easier to have a conversation about this with people that have been exposed to it.
You know, and you see lifters like Maddie Rogers, for instance. You know, she was real big. You couldn't talk about weightlifting and women without seeing people like Maddie Rogers, who was the big CrossFit girl for a while. I cannot think of her name off the top of my head. But she was kind of like the poster woman for CrossFit. But they're all, you know, fairly jacked, good-looking women that
Right.
lifted heavy weights. And younger women would see them and say, "Oh, I can do that. I can lift heavy, and I'm not going to look like a fucking man."
Right.
You know.
Yeah, I don't think that there's anybody anywhere on earth that has turned into a man from lifting heavier weights. I don't think that's ever occurred.
No.
Now, even, you know, back in the 80s when the Bulgarian weightlifting team was giving all of their girls steroids, all right, they got some pretty big old girls, right, out of that program. But they didn't look like boys.
No, and you also,
They did not look like boys.
They didn't, but and you also have to think about that they were genetically picked out to
Yes.
do what they're doing.
Yes. Yes.
And they're lifting
at the
at it-
time in the Eastern Bloc.
Yeah.
You couldn't try to get on the team. They chose you.
They chose you. You
They
got picked.
selected you, and you were subjected to a very different set of circumstances than everybody else was in that country.
So you were picked because of your genetics.
Yes.
You are an elite level lifter, even without peds. Even without peds, you are an elite level lifter.
Right.
The peds are that extra 2% that they
Yes.
needed. Right.
That's all there is to
So
it.
you have all of these factors that would, quote unquote, make you big and bulky and make you
Right.
look like a man, and yet they are still women that are lifting weights, and they don't look like men, and they don't become men.
Well, and it's very interesting when there is no evidence, ladies. There is no evidence that lifting weights makes you masculine. There's no evidence. That's never occurred anywhere. Now, you may be able to cite an example of an ugly girl that started lifting weights and got to be a bigger ugly girl, but that's an isolated example. And you know it's an isolated example, so what you're doing when you say, I don't want to lift heavy weights, is you're making an excuse for not wanting to do the thing that works. You're making an excuse for yourself, and that's all you're doing. You're making an excuse, and it's to your own detriment. You are walking away from the very thing you need to be walking toward to get a body transformation done, because some idiot has told you that you're going to get big, bulky muscles instead of sculpting long, lean muscle. Oh, it's so naughty.
You know, and the thing that really needs to be driven home is this is for everybody, but everybody is not for this.
No,
You know,
no, that's absolutely true.
You know, so like getting under a heavy bar, and we talk about this, getting under a bar and doing a set of 5 and standing up on that 4th rep and thinking to yourself, well, I don't know if this is going to fucking go. And then taking a big breath and then going down to the bottom and pushing as hard as you can for as long as you can.
Yeah, not everybody
can do that.
Not everybody can do that.
It is learned.
It's a learned behavior. You can't, not everybody do it at first. But everybody can learn how to do it, but not everybody wants to.
Yeah.
Not everybody wants to. People want things to be easier.
Yes.
Join us again this week on Starting Strength Radio. We are going to talk about a bunch of very important stuff. We're going to talk about how this program works. We're going to talk about how this program works for everybody, whether you're a boy or a girl, because you've got the same DNA. And DNA is what causes adaptation once stress is applied. So we're going to talk about all those things. We're going to talk about how silly it is to think about this process in any way other than stress, recovery, and adaptation, no matter who you are. All right? Next time, right here on Starting Strength Radio.